Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, theater, and entertainment. And today we are joined by the fantastic team behind the movie Sound of Metal. We have Mikkel Nielsen, who is the editor on the film, and Nicolas Becker, who is the sound designer on the film, who are both currently nominated for Oscars. So congratulations on that. And Mikkel, I wanted to start by asking you about a lot of the editing choices that you make in the film, because the entire film is very much driven around the idea of bringing us inside of Ruben as a character and bringing us inside his head and his perspective. So how did that inform a lot of the choices that you were making in editing throughout the film?
So the whole idea was to try and what we called awaken the senses in order for us to really feel where sound is like a feeling. So we wanted really to feel that we get inside of Ruben's head as a kind of point of hearing. That's a language that we had to create and try to make that contract with you and I as the audience about how to understand when we go in and when we go out of him, but then also to try and say that this film will always be equal with your main character, with Ruben. We never know more than Ruben, up to the point where he knows more than you. So there's the first half of the film up to the slide scene is where you change perspective. So he knows more, he knows sign language, and everything is subtitled from there on. So the whole first part would be closed captioned. Everything he doesn't understand in the scenes, we don't understand. And we would then go in and out of that internal and external audio perspective.
Yeah. And Nicolas, with Ruben's sound and the fact that we also hear the film in his perspective a lot of the time, and the fact that the most he's ever going to hear is 28% of something, how did that really specifically inform the way that you were thinking about a lot of the reverberations and what would be the sound that he would actually be experiencing that you could then transcend to us on screen?
I mean, first of all, what was very special is that Darius and his brother, Heb, who co-writes the script with Darius, was super documented about the people who lose hearing. So when we met, they already give me so much information. So it was such a good start. And also, I think I've done some experience by the past to kind of create an inner point of view, I did that. I think the first time it was like on 127 hours, where, the guy is like blocked in this canyon. And there is one moment where you really go in his head, where he's really like, you can really go into his body. And I think also what I've done for Gravity, where we had to try kind of create something, even if you are in space and it's silent. So we try to understand that maybe in the suit there is air, and maybe when they are in contact, they can start to hear through the body. And I think it was a bit like a continuation, because I understood that also when you lose hearing, it's very similar that when you are underwater, you kind of hear something, but most of what you're hearing is actually a vibration through your tissue and your bones. So I did a lot of that's some stuff. I mean, that's research I have done already for Gravity, using contact mic and geophones and like Solidian mics, but that's something we push forward with Riz also, because when you have this sequence where he is going to see an audiologist, and we had like a booth in this location. So I asked Riz if he could stay a bit more, and after the shooting day, we spent like 2 or 3 hours, and I put all this weird mic, like also I did a DIY stethoscopic mic. So I think it's not so much about reverberation. It's more about giving the feeling that you're really inside of the body, and it's really like you're not in air, and in a way you're built your own sonic prison. It's a bit like your of yourself, So it's very specific, and we did actually work and prepare that for with the DOP also. When like the first time Darius came to Paris for 1 week to discuss about the film, 1 year before the shoot, at the end of the week, the DOP came and we had a long conversation about how we can combine point of view and point of hearing, and what could be the tool. I mean, like to try to create a toolbox for Darius. And then after, more or less, we did we did a bit the same when Mikkel arrived on start to edit. He also tried to manipulate these tools, like and try to see how he could create an arc with that, because I think it's something which is good. Is to be able to create something interesting for this positioning, but something even more complex, it's to create like a nice arc on the whole film, because it could be very tiring. It could be or it could be it could feel like not natural, But I think the work which I've done, Mikkel with Darius, to find the exact perfect positioning of all this sequence was such an important thing in the film, more than the effect by itself, I think.
And I wanted to ask both of you, I think to Mikkel's point earlier about the fact that we never know more than Ruben knows about those opening frames of the film, because, I remember the first time I saw the movie, it was actually in cinemas when it played at Toronto. And I remember how the film felt, even just in those first few frames, like it completely washes over your body. And you really start teasing out the idea of sound and his hearing loss in that moment, even though it hasn't been addressed in the script yet. And the cuts that you choose as well very much keep us in the perspective of Riz. We move over to Lou for a moment, but really from the perspective of Riz behind the drum set. And so for both of you, I was really interested in how you used a lot of different creative choices to keep us in his perspective and to start just very gently teasing out this idea of what the film was going to be even before the dialogue comes in and tells us this.
I can say that the key to this to the film was to find out that the concert should open the film. Mm-hmm. That wasn't how it was intentional. The whole idea of having that circle of Riz sitting in the same shot as the end shot on the drums, getting ready, and you have that feed from the whole thing, and then creating the connection with us as the audience to see and feel that they are actually playing this. It's very physical, but you don't have cutaways. You don't have like small close-ups of a snare drum or these things. You see the live performance. They are the ones playing it, and you really feel it. But it's also, you start searching for a very long time. You see this guy, and then you see his POV of this woman. And you see the relationship that he's the drummer and she's the lead singer. You don't know the connection between them, but afterwards, because it's so aggressive and so loud, you're almost on the edge of your seat until it cuts to that interior of the airstream, where it's very silent, and he starts very tender to wake up, and he starts to look. You open the eyes again. So we start the concert by opening the ears, and then we start opening the eyes, and the air dust and the smoothie and the coffee dripping, and he's looking out and he looks at Lou and he puts on music. It's very small, tender moments that awakens these senses that you are starting to look and you start to listen. And then he's again the driver. He's the drummer of the relationship. So you see them as this professional couple, but also private couple, being very tender about each other. So that was the whole idea, little by little, to open these senses of Ruben, because we could then use these same images very effective when he loses the hearing. For us, at least from a perspective of understanding, we go into an internal sound as a blueprint in the edit, because we knew, the hope was that you would really feel it, but in the edit we would just mute or silence the sound a lot of times, just to find out when you wanted to be internal or external with Ruben. But then we use these images like the smoothie and the coffee dripping to create the same. You've seen it with him, with the sound, and you also see it without the sound. It's just a very clear image to understand what's missing.
And it's what is also very, I mean, like to continue in that thing, for me, the sound also bringing really like the kind of physical aspect, very direct with the audience also, you know. What was very important for the opening of the film, that you should really feel that you are on stage and playing drums, you know. And I think you feel it when you are losing hearing, you really feel it, you know. And when the sound is good, it's really pristine, you know, like in real life, you know. So I think it was also trying to put the audience in this kind of physical journey. Also, there is this aspect you can see when you start to learn sign language. It's also physical. You know, they were really playing all the instruments. So everything is also, it's also, I think, a way to establish that we want to create a very simple and direct language vocabulary with the audience. And also the idea of memory, you know, like what was saying Mikkel about, you see something and then after you see the same thing but with no sound. I think it's a bit the general idea of the film also, to put the audience, to reconnect audience also with their own memory, you know, like memory of being outside, memory of being in a concert, memory of, you know, like, but in a very simple way. And I think because the film is also quite become slower, you know, the second part, I think it gives also a lot of room for the people to think about it, you know, and to reconnect, because I think it's the film is more general. It's not only about someone who's lose hearing, but it's something happened and you have to learn to be resilient, you know. So I think it's also something even more large, no larger than that, you know. And I think this second part give a lot of opportunity for the people to, you know, to mix their own memories with their own life with what's happened to his, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you use as a creative tactic throughout the film, which I thought was really fascinating and wanted to ask you both about, is that shift of what type of sound are we hearing and what perspective are we in? You know, when Ruben goes to the doctor's surgery, it's very muffled a lot of the time. And then we hear the doctor's voice in real time. And then there's the later scene where he's at Lou's dad's apartment during the party, and Lou and her dad are singing, and we actually hear the sound of them performing this song until the camera goes into a close-up on Riz, and then it shifts to what he's actually hearing at that point. So I was really interested in the way that you determined when we would hear what he is hearing and when we're hearing what the outside world is hearing around him.
I mean, it's more for Mikkel to give the answer, but I just want to establish, I mean, to say something that what was very interesting in the process of working together, that actually I give access to Mikkel to be able to simulate different, you know, like the hearing loss, and then after the cochlear implant. So he was totally able to actually not guess but feel, you know, what's actually it's doing, you know, on him. So he was, I think it was like the way the collaboration we had between sound and picture was really fantastic, and I think very powerful. And normally people don't do that so often, but I think it's open a territory of collaboration between sound and picture, which where we really want to continue to go, you know, both of us, you know,
To explore.
Yeah, to explore. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Mara, what Nicolas gave me a library of all the atmosphere for the whole film. Nicolas doesn't like to use library sounds. I really like the idea to use the original sounds, and I also like the idea that the more simple, the better. If we can find a simple language or something that opens up everything, it becomes grander. Just as the right atmosphere sound of a field or a room tone or this just creates a real opening experience for us as an audience. He provided a program for the whole backend, where the idea for the film was to up to the point where you start losing with the cochlear implants. We needed to have like almost an extreme organic sound, and from that point it had to be very digital sound. It had to be very metallic almost. But then we would, for the whole backend, I would with this program run it through the whole sound system. I would run it through the cochlear implant sound, this program, so we could hear how much you actually needed to be in and out, and that created the idea to go from the concert with Lou and her dad into the head of Ruben. But the only way it worked would be that you create a language up in the start, because if we show it for the first time, that we go from our perspective into his internal perspective, where we want it to work, it's not going to work. But if we show it like multiple times up front, first time you hear it when he's losing his hearing with the tinnitus, and then you see him playing the concert and you hear the concert, but you also go into his internal sound. It's just as an idea for us, to you as the audience, to understand this is also a language that we can work with, but you actually understand it. You understand this is how it sounds. Here we go. We also do it on the piano. You see the guy playing on the piano and it goes into Ruben's perspective. But the only reason we do it these two places is because we wanted it to work in the concert with Lou's dad. Because it becomes very emotional by having that. I almost get goosebumps when I hear her singing that second tone on his singing, where they're singing in tonality. But then when it comes so distorted and into his world, it almost becomes so unbearable that he's never gonna get what he used to have, right? And that's where you create those small languages for things to work some places. Yeah.
And Nicolas, you were mentioning a little bit before the difference in sound once he has the cochlear implants, and I know that you had an opportunity to interview people who very specifically had been born with hearing and then lost it and gotten cochlear implants to describe what that sounds like, and you create this sensory experience where it's almost reminiscent of what it's like when you're underwater, where you hear the muffled versions of the sound and there's a little bit of distortion, but you really have to focus in to pick up on any specific element. So what was that process and that journey, and the types of microphones and tactics that you were using to create such a specific sound for that part of the film?
It's funny because actually I'm working with a neurologist for another project, and he's thinking, he's trying to understand how you imagine things, you know, and he says that you always imagine things from reality, you know, and reality is extremely complex and amazing. And I think my first reflex will be to try to simulate myself, you know, this kind of situation, and try to feel it through my body. So then when I'm working, I can see if it's right or not, you know, and I really like that. So after, it's more about to experiment, you know. I knew, for example, that I didn't want to have an effect for the cochlear implants. You know, people know, because normally it's only the people who have this cochlear implant who can actually feel what it is, you know. So if there is any reference with something you have heard, like a guitar distortion or something, you know, like something you have heard before in your life, it's not working. So I really try to find something which look like nothing you have heard before. So it's thing of using software which are try to mimic the analog or the acoustic world, I work with with tools which are able to understand sound in another way, you know, more like the kind of technologies they use for AI or for machine learning or for like, you know, so it's try to in a way I deconstruct the sound and I reconstruct it, but it's not matching. So it's like it's like if you I call it like the Frankenstein effect. You know, it's a bit like if you take something alive, you cut that in pieces, and then after you glue it, it's not working, you know, anymore. It's something, just creates something weird and strange, you know. So it's a bit the same with the voice, because the voice is a more complex sound of the universe for us, you know. So it's I think we're very sensitive to that. So if you are creating strange things like that, you straight away put the people in a kind of uncanny valley, you know. So I mean, like it's a normal. I think it's a normal process when you work on film. That's why I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to, each film I'm doing, to in a way start from scratch, you know, from all the experience I had before, but really to try to say, okay, you know, what I should hear, what I, you know, what's, you know, like to really. So I'm trying to put in the position of the audience too, you know. So I try not to be redundant with what I've been done before, you know. So I prefer more to connect my work with my own memory of sound, you know, the mood of the shoot. You know, when I was a shoot, I love to go to the shoot to hear the real voice, you know, the actor with my ear, you know, to feel the place, to hear the insect, you know, because I try to recover this feeling, you know. It's a bit like him who try to recover something. When I'm editing, I try to recover something also, you know, to recover this experience. So I try to be as precise as possible on that.
And Mikkel, you were mentioning before about how that scene where Ruben's on the slide with the young kid, that really is a transformative moment in the entire film and really shifts and changes a lot for him as a character. But it also feels like that's the moment where you start to use editing choices and the types of cuts that you're making to really shift a lot of the pacing of the movie, and the story very much kind of dictates a lot of what that pacing is up until that point, and then it kind of shifts and ebbs and flows. And so I was really curious about the different ways in which you thought about pacing depending on the story structure throughout the film, leading up to and then following that really pivotal point.
Yeah. So we had it as three structures, and we broke it down to the title of the film. You have the sound, you have the off, and you have the middle. And the sound is the whole part of until you enter the world of the deaf community, and the off of finding yourself or finding out who you are is that whole section until the point where he leaves. And then the middle is when you activate the cochlear implants. And those were treated like three different films. But you needed to create those languages in order to go in and out of his world sometimes, or just sometimes give the audience the ability to remember that we are actually hearing it from his perspective or not, or we see it. And the first part is very effective. It's moving very fast. The whole first part of the sound, the concert, everything, it has a faster pace. It also creates the languages of how to get in and out, or these ideas of what we can use later on in the film. Then the whole off at the deaf community, except for the dialogue scenes, are almost treated like documentary scenes. We are almost observing things from as a fly on the wall, and try to be seeing things and open things with Ruben. We see and we search for things, and then when you have created that whole idea of that internal sound with the concert and him saying to the kid, "I can take him out," and you suddenly cut out and you hear that guy dancing, and that's the thing. But you go into it again, it becomes very emotional, that whole thing, that he awakens that sense from Ruben that he becomes a drummer again. And the fact that the kid just lies down the face on the slide, the metal slide, it becomes so tender, and his drumming opens up that whole thing into those edits that almost is like a montage of time, where you suddenly see him very peaceful with the kids, being almost like a teacher, together with the teacher. Suddenly he's still a student, but he's more part of the whole group, and they're playing around with him, and it becomes very tender and emotional. And you also have a moment where you feel that he sits in silence, that he actually has that moment, because when Joe then asks in the last scene, did you ever have that moment of
Yes.
silence? You know he had it because you were there with him. So you feel up to that whole moment, and then you have the whole section of the metal, which is very emotional when it becomes activated, and we bring you to Europe, and we need to develop a language where you know that you're in Europe, and then up to the point when you hear lose dad, it cuts out again, but you stay in that real world and you meet Lou's dad, and you meet Lou, and then you bring in that internal sound of this foreign place with all these French voices, and it's so disoriented because all the sounds, the sound that Nicolas and the team did is absolutely amazing, because when you walk out in that at the party in the garden, it becomes so disoriented, and it becomes so lonely when you stand with him and she's looking at him.
Yeah, for that it was very interesting, because I mean, like, we work with an amazing mixer called Jaime Basque, and he had this idea about because first my idea was to actually give contradictory information to the brain, in terms of localization. So something can't be in the same time in left and right,
Mm-hmm.
So your brain is like lost. But then he did like two circles, and there is two, and everything is moving like that. So it's a double disorientation. So you're really, really, really lost, And I think it was what he has done with that was amazing. And I want to also say something, because I think Mikkel in another interview said something I like. He said, like, in fact, with this film, this kind of film happened not so often, and we were, we are practicing, we are trying always to do, more interesting work and experiment, and sometimes a film like that happen, and you think it's a moment to really go for it, and it's amazing when you actually have a producer and the director who say, like, let's go, So normally it's happened very often that you work on a film, you see the potentiality of doing very interesting things, and people want to remain more in a classic world, and they say, yes, but it's going to be a bit too much, I don't think it's going to be interesting, I think we have to, and for and this film, we had like all the team pushing, say, yes, let's go, let's go, let's do this journey all together, and trying to, we don't know where we go as a character, but we go, and I think it's really like fantastic for me, because when the nomination arrived, and it was not only me but also me and Mikkel and the two Paul Rassi, and like everybody nearly was nominated. It was so cool because of that, because it was really like we all push, and we all did this journey all together. So I think it's great, for me.
Yeah.
I'm super happy because of that, because I hope it's going to give more courage or more energy for directors to explore more, like the possibility of working the sound and the picture together,
But Mara, what to understand what it was is that the director Darius, he had this film in his system for so long, and he knew absolutely everything he wanted, but he also knew that in order to achieve it, he had to let it go sometimes, to let Nicolas work on the sound or to let me try things on the edit. Darius is an editor himself, and he was so curious to see what can you actually do, that he let you open that toolbox that you have been trying to make for the past. I've been editing for 25 years or so, and you always put small things and small ideas in that toolbox, and sometimes someone come by and say, try to open it and let's try and play around and see, because his ambition was extremely high, but I think he actually achieved it, because you saw how much he actually put into everything by himself, and you also saw how much the actors and the non-actors and Nicolas and the DP and everyone involved, the costume designer. So you wanted to walk that extra mile just to search and try, because you can always find it, and the language can be found. And they even they allowed us to edit again on the film after the final mix, because we saw there's some from that blueprint we made, there's some of the things that are overtold or that are maybe a little less. So we could actually cut out, I think we cut out 12 minutes of the whole film from what you saw in Toronto to the final film right now, which is super interesting, because it was only done because we wanted to make the film better.
And also even the mixer, so again, the opening and say, oh, everybody was happy with it, but he said like, guys, I have the things that I can even do better, So everybody was in that kind of mood, like trying to really push the boundaries and try to achieve something, I think it's fantastic. It's like also it's a very utopic thing, but it's also because the film also is great, and what he's talking about is so important, that it's not technical, it's not only about something technical, it's really something deep, So I think it's give you this extra energy also to go as far as you can,
Yeah. And lastly, I wanted to quickly ask you about some of the conversations that were had about the way in which the deaf community would experience this film. And we see that through moments such as Ruben's character starting to learn about different sounds that he can feel, such as the scene where him and all the kids are placing their hands on the piano and feeling those reverberations. And it is very much a film that you feel in your body as well. And even the way that you use a lot of editing cuts, such as when he's first having that conversation with Paul Raci, and it cuts back and forth so that we're always seeing the person whose lips are speaking on camera at that time, so that people are able to lip read. So what were some of those conversations about the importance and the necessity and the way in which the deaf community would experience the film, and how that influenced choices that you were making?
That was the reason I signed up to the film, because Darius said from the start, I want to create a film where the deaf community will see this as a whole, and you as a hearing person, Mikkel, will be feeling like they normally do when they watch a film. It has to be close captioned. It has to be. It has to have all these things. And if you were in Toronto, you even saw it with that community where they were laughing, and we all felt like, what's going on? What's happening? And that was the exact thing that we really wanted to achieve. And it was such a beautiful night for me and for Darius, at least, because we have been talking about that moment. Can you actually do that? Is it possible to create that moment where someone will have a feeling that this is a film for that whole culture? That was such a beautiful moment.
Yeah, that sounds really wonderful. Well, I want to thank both of you for such an in-depth conversation and talking to us this afternoon, and congratulations on this film. It's such a phenomenal accomplishment. So thank you to both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.